The Nerdcast Empire is on the air. We are back with another episode of the Hard Rock Empire for Sunday, July the 6th, 2025. I am Matt in the studio. Great to have you along with us. And got another pretty good week of music once again. A lot of good stuff. Some big artists releasing some music this week as well. We'll talk a little bit about that. Of course, we'll get to news headlines first. We'll talk about the new releases as of June the 13th. We'll get into the vault, a couple of classic albums, and then we'll finish things up with a 4th of July-themed power trio to wrap up this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. Joining me in studio, as always, but not as always on his birthday, but joining me on his birthday and in studio this week is Mike. Mike, how's it going?
Yeah, normally I don't work on my birthday, so I'm not sure how this happened, but here I am anyway. There's some good music this week. Kind of excited to talk about it.
Yeah, I think it was a pretty solid week overall, and again, kind of some different stuff this week, which was, again, always kind of a welcome change when we have a little bit of variety in the music that is on the playlist this week. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that as the episode goes on, but of course, we're going to get to our news headlines before we do all that, and of course, really maybe the biggest headline in metal over the last 24 to 48 hours was the big event involving Black Sabbath, of course. The send-off event, Back to the Beginning, set in Birmingham, England yesterday. It was pretty much an all-day affair, and it basically culminated in the original classic lineup of Black Sabbath getting together one final time. As far as we know, nothing is forever in rock and metal, but there's really no reason to believe this wasn't it. But it was a star-studded affair, a ton of rock and metal acts giving their takes on some of the classic Black Sabbath songs. We've got a couple of stories to post in the chat. One is kind of a collection from Metal Injection of some of the performances that they have video of, so we'll post that as well. And then Billboard has kind of a top so many things to note from the event. So if you want to check that out as well, in case you happen to miss it, this will give you a little bit of an idea of what was going on. Mike, I know you were kind of keeping tabs on what was going on. Some of the super groups that were put together, obviously, just a crazy lineup of musicians, clearly all paying homage to Ozzy Osbourne. But your general thoughts on kind of what you saw from yesterday's event?
Yeah, people were kind of posting videos on YouTube as the concert was unfolding, it seemed like. And I got to catch a couple of them as they were thrown up there. One of which being Tobias Forge singing Bark at the Moon with along with Vernon Reid, Nuno Bettencourt, Adam Wakeman, Rudy Sarzo, and Travis Barker.
That's a ridiculous lineup.
Really cool cover. And just an insane supergroup lineup. I did also catch Guns N' Roses. What song did I see of theirs?
They did a couple songs.
Never Say Die.
Yeah.
Which, that's also a song that Megadeth covered back in the day, too. And I feel like both singers, whether it be Mustaine or Axl Rose, that's like the perfect song for them. Like, it's just right in their range, and that was really cool too. But some of the other performances that they mentioned happening with these supergroups, you had Snowblind featuring Billy Corgan on vocals, Tom Morello, KK Downing, Adam Jones, Rudy Sarzo, Danny Carey. Flying High Again with Sammy Hagar, Nuno Bettencourt, Adam Wakeman, Rudy Sarzo, Chad Smith, and Vernon Reid. Ultimate Sin with Lizzie Hale on vocals, Nuno Bettencourt, Jake E. Lee, David Ellefson, Mike Borden, Adam Wakeman. And Shot in the Dark with David Draymond, Jake E. Lee, David Ellefson, Mike Borden, and Adam Wakeman. Just, obviously, Sabbath and Ozzy, both legends. Ozzy's solo career outside of Sabbath, just as iconic as his time in Black Sabbath. And you just, given the enormity of the artists and just the influence that Ozzy and Sabbath have had on, really being one of the founders of metal as we know it, this is the kind of concert that should kind of sunset that career. That's what you want to see. And, I've seen a few people kind of upset that Ozzy only sang like a handful of songs, but his current condition, that's an accomplishment.
Yeah.
And I don't think you would have wanted him to do an entire set. And the fact he was able to do this at all and get the band together for that, I think anyone who paid to see it got their money's worth.
Yeah, I mean, even if it would have just been the tribute acts, if it would have just been all the other artists doing their songs, and he would have made just a guest appearance, honestly, that could have been the best case scenario possibly, because you know what his health condition is. You know that the chances of him being able to do more than a handful of songs was going to be unlikely. So, I think there were probably some people that thought maybe he would do a song or just be on stage. And, the fact he was able to do 4 songs and, you still had all these other acts that were able to pay tribute, whether it was their individual bands or as pieces of kind of a combo, I think is exactly the way it should have been handled. And it's nice when you have an event like this and it seems, and like you said, there are always going to be people online that are going to complain because that's just what people do online. But it felt like overall it was largely positive, that people were very pleased. They were happy to see the people paying tribute. The music performances came off really well. Crowd was great, as you would anticipate. And like you said, really just a very fitting way for this era of Black Sabbath. Now, will Black Sabbath continue to tour? Almost certainly in some form or fashion, but it's not going to be this Black Sabbath. This should be, like, in all likelihood, it for this classic original group of Black Sabbath.
It's hard to say, because when you think about the second most iconic lead singer Black Sabbath had was Dio, and when they got back together with Dio, they didn't call themselves Black Sabbath that last time. They totally distanced themselves from the Sabbath name, almost despite some of the re-releases they've had with some of their other lead singers throughout the time, like kind of in between Dio appearances. I feel like they've kind of just established Black Sabbath as the Ozzy version at this point.
Which would be great if that is how it goes out. I think there are other bands that maybe should consider that when you have just an iconic, specifically iconic in Ozzy being with the band, that maybe when Ozzy can no longer do that, you don't go forward with the name. And like I said, there are other bands that probably should just keep that same idea rather than having what ends up being kind of a tribute band to the original band. I mean, do they still sound good? Yes, but is it really the band you're paying to see? No. And I kind of like that philosophy. If this really is the last time you see a bill with Black Sabbath on it, I think most people would be okay with that.
Yeah, and it's not like the other members are necessarily spring chickens either. I don't think Bill Ward was necessarily doing a whole lot at this point. Iommi and Butler, they might have some projects still, but I don't see many tours in their future necessarily.
Yeah, probably not, but a great way to go out, and I think kudos to everybody involved that put it together, because as we talk about a lot on this podcast, any music festival is a challenge. And when you're trying to put together lineups and super groups and you want this to be kind of the fitting end, it really feels like, by and large, they did about as well as you could have done. I think people are going to remember the event fondly, which is exactly how it should be. They've got to be the most influential metal band of all time.
Yeah, I would say probably.
Like, it's best is always a subjective term, but influential, you would have to think that most of the metal bands you like were either directly influenced by Black Sabbath or were influenced by a band who was influenced by Black Sabbath. So
absolutely,
the tree is enormous. So really cool event. Definitely check out some of the videos. I think they hit a home run with this thing, which I think is all anybody ever hopes for. And, hopefully they kind of made peace with the moment and, can kind of enjoy, whatever comes after that. So definitely worth starting our news with. This second story, I always find these stories kind of interesting, and I feel like there's a lot of other stuff here in this article from Blabbermouth, but I kind of like the headline. It kind of drew my attention, so kudos to whoever wrote the headline. LA Guns frontman Phil Lewis basically talking about his advice to young musicians, and the quote says you should have some kind of backup. And he says this while also admitting that when he got into music, he didn't have a backup, that it was just, this is it. This is the only plan. And I think this doesn't just apply to musicians. I think this applies really to anybody who's doing anything on a creative basis. Yeah. And I think that's why I wanted to kind of bring it to the forefront is, content creation or videos or music or whatever it might be. everybody would love to get to the point that they can make a living off of that. I think that's the dream of anybody who's involved in stuff like this. But the reality is not everybody's going to make a living off of it. And I think this is really good advice from Lewis to say, like, yeah, it's awesome to dive into something like this, but man, make sure you got a plan B and maybe a plan C, or make this your plan B or plan C to make sure that you can still have a living and still do the things you want to do.
Yeah, it's interesting because on one hand, it comes off as like a, hey, learn from my mistakes kind of story. But at the same time, I think it also points to the landscape is so much different now. Like back then, like, you know, with a band like LA Guns or any number of bands that got big on the Sunset Strip, that was still kind of like a long shot, lightning in a bottle situation.
Yeah.
But there's no bottle anymore. There's no lightning. It's just the chance of something like that happening is even less likely. Now, on the plus side, there's at least an online infrastructure where you can get your music to people or your art to people. There may not be as many interested people or people interested in paying money for it, but you can at least get it out there. So there is some kind of positive on that. Mm. But yeah, I think no matter what you do, unless you're already making a living at it, don't expect to make a living at it. Like the way it's set up now is it's almost like you're setting up a small business for yourself, knowing that it could be 5-10 years before it's actually profitable. What do you do until then?
Yeah, for sure. I think it is easier to make it now and harder to make it big. It is easier to get out there. It is easier to start something because there are so many outlets to start something. There's Twitch, there's YouTube, there's, SoundCloud, there's, Bandcamp. We talk about Bandcamp all the time. What a great resource it is. And because of that, you can get out there. If you've got a bunch of friends that want to get together and put together a band, if you want to start a podcast, if you want to, do streaming video games, you absolutely can do that.
You're not handing people like a mixtape out of a trunk just to get your sound out there. Like it's a lot easier.
Yeah, I mean the entry point is so much easier. Now there are a lot fewer people who are making it big now because, like Mike said, it's a fragmented audience now because there's so many people out there. The odds of that person finding you now, once you have made it, is a lot harder. But if you look at it, I think the way that they're saying that, like, look, this is, it's great that you're wanting to pursue this. Do it as a side project. Do it as a backup plan. And if it makes it great, like, you can quit your job and you can do this full time. But if you don't, you're still getting to do something you love. You're getting to bring joy to people, and that's awesome too. And I think it's great to see. People who have, like you said, kind of made the mistakes or maybe wouldn't do it the same way if they got into the business in 2025 as they did in 1985. I think that's great advice, and I think that's kind of why I wanted to share it, because I think it's true for just about anything that is not your full-time job. That, yes, do it, love it, because it can bring you sanity when you're just tired of punching the clock every day and doing whatever it is that you do to pay your bills. But until it pays your bills, then it's got to be the secondary thing.
And I think there's probably a bit of a misconception, especially around bands that made it at the same time as LA Guns made it, that it was just about making money and getting big. Like, that's obviously always going to be a driving factor with you doing anything in life, but ultimately, if you don't enjoy the process of creating and the actual art itself, you're not going to be one of those bands that do make it. I think you have to have that love for what you're doing to be successful. And I think sometimes, especially with a maligned type of rock, which that glam hair metal scene was, I think people just assumed that the musicianship and the songwriting, like, that was somehow not what they cared about, and I don't think that's the case at all.
Yeah, in fact, I think we've kind of debunked that on this very podcast, that, there's a ton of great musicianship that came out of that era. It was just a very superficial looking music, but the music behind it was every bit as, technical and skilled as any other era's popular music. And I think it's taken a lot of years for people to honestly admit that, which is great that it's finally happened. But like I said, I sometimes I see these stories like this and I want to just kind of bring them out there because, again, I think it is a reminder for everybody. Like, you should do the things you love to do because, again, life's short. we're never, no guarantee that tomorrow is going to happen. Like we all hope we wake up in the morning. So do the things you want to do, but don't set aside your future to take that risk now. Don't go pull the slot machine handle and hope that that turns up, that you're going to make a bunch of money.
Well, I think sometimes you have to accept that just having that thing on the side to kind of supplement what you do in your daily life, even just to kind of take some of the stress off, kind of give you an escape, that's in and of itself worth it, even if you don't end up making tons of money at it.
And sometimes you get, I don't want to say burned out on those secondary things. I think we've all kind of experienced that from time to time, but when you think of what you're going to be doing if you don't have those other things, sometimes that can be far worse when you're just, all I do is I wake up and I go to work and then I get done and then I go to bed. Like, it feels like you're not living for a purpose at that point. So other than to make money, which, is important. Like, you got to pay your bills, but, got to live too. And I think that's also in the end, that a bit of advice. So kind of enjoyed that. Just wanted to share that article. Thought it was a really good perspective. We talk about Alice Cooper a lot on this podcast. Here's another honor for Alice Cooper, which I thought was worth mentioning as our final news story of the day. Of course, Alice Cooper has done just about everything in the music business, and now Alice Cooper will be inducted into the Radio Hall of Fame. Of course, he's hosted Nights with Alice Cooper and Alice's Attic radio shows, one of 11 individuals in the 2025 class of the Radio Hall of Fame. That'll be coming up in Chicago on a Thursday, October the 30th. If you want to get tickets, they are $595 a person, so good luck. I mean, I'm sure they will sell because I'm sure it'll be corporations that probably buy a lot of them up. But, I like there are a lot of good quotes in here about the importance of radio and what radio did for guys of his generation. Because, again, without radio, there is no Alice Cooper because that's how you got the music to the masses, So just a really cool story. Alice Cooper obviously is a legend and probably another honor that is certainly well deserved to see him going in the Radio Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I feel like he was one of the earlier rock stars that became notable for his radio show. I mean, it goes all the way back to 2004 or whatever. I did see where it jumped stations due to one of the stations changing formats in 2014 and then ultimately got dropped in 2023 due to a change in ownership from the stations that he was airing on. Then he relaunched the show as Alice's Attic. His live set at Sonic Temple was amazing. So any honors this guy gets separate from that is just icing on the cake. I was looking on the website to the 2025 inductees. That's a pretty decent class. You got Alice Cooper, obviously. You have Bob and Sherry. I believe they're a morning duo or something. Colin Cowherd.
Yeah, I did see he was going in.
Dee Dee McGuire, Mike McVeigh, Mojo in the Morning.
Oh, Mojo in the Morning.
Martha Quinn, legend. Julie Talbot, Scott Simon, and Shelley Stewart.
That's crazy. There are a couple other names on there that I recognize just from different syndicated radio programs over the years, and obviously that's kind of where a lot of that comes from. And, if I can get on my radio soapbox, because radio was such an important part of my broadcast career, getting involved at WSWO and WKFI, obviously long since gone out of Wilmington, Ohio, and I think the worst thing to the radio industry that ever happened was when they lifted the restrictions on how many stations in a market that the corporate stations could buy, because then your Clear Channels, your Cumuluses, all these big mega companies basically just swallowed up all the radio, and you lost kind of the variety that used to exist on terrestrial radio. I mean, WSWO certainly wasn't like the world's greatest radio station, but it was uniquely tied to the community of Wilmington, to Clinton County.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a place for that out there, that you could have a radio network that serves the local area. It's not just about repeating the same playlist of music that's on every other rock or country or whatever it is. It's those are just not enjoyable, and it's not even the music we talk about each and every week on this podcast. But radio is important. It's one of those things, like, if I was ever going to lobby for an issue, I wish there was a way to take local radio back to what it used to be. It's never going to be the same because obviously you have satellite radio, you have MP3 players, you have, there are lots of other things you're going to pass time with. But I think a local radio outlet is important to communities, and I think it would be great if we got back to that someday and it wasn't just this stale, corporate-owned garbage that you get in your car each and every week. But that's my 2 cents.
I think kind of back to the prior story, I think it's just another avenue where a band could potentially get some sort of traction that doesn't exist anymore because all stations play the same thing. I want to say, was it Rush that kind of got big by some like random radio station, just picked up the record?
Right?
I think so, and started playing it, and that kind of like got their ball rolling. Like, that's not a thing anymore. And it should be. I think part of the allure that existed with terrestrial radio was the fact that what you're listening to in Cincinnati is what you're listening to in Cincinnati, not everywhere else. There's someone who is programming it with us in mind. You may not be getting the same experience if you live in Pittsburgh or wherever.
Yeah.
I don't know why people don't think there's appeal to that.
Yeah, and I know people will say, "Oh, well, you got Twitch, you've got YouTube," but Twitch doesn't come into your home automatically. YouTube doesn't come into your home automatically. Your car still has radio.
Yeah.
And in fact, I saw that there's a bipartisan bill, not to talk politics too much on this podcast, where...
It's okay if it's bipartisan.
Yeah, that's what I figured it's safe. But it's basically an AM act that basically requires car manufacturers to keep AM radios in newly made cars. And I think, that's good. Like, radios needs to stay. And like I said, hopefully maybe that's the lobbyists starting with that issue. And then it would be great if we could get away from, at least if we can't get away from corporate ownership, because it's not like they're going to be like, oh, we'll just sell our stations to mom and pop for $5. Like, that's not going to happen. But can you find a way to open up more radio frequencies so that local radio can make a comeback? Like, I think that's something that can happen, especially as we get to the more HD signals and stuff like that, where you have more bandwidth to do that. I would love to see a resurgence in radio, but it may never happen. But to me, I wish it did.
It just seems like one of those things that, come the apocalypse, you want to know that you can flip the AM dial and find something.
Yeah.
And maybe that's insane, but there is a certain security blanket feeling to that. Like, if worse comes to worse, I can find 700 WLW or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, that's one of those things. If the phone signals go out, if the internet's not available, like you have AM radio, you have FM radio that's still out there. And like I said, like Mike said, I think some of these bands that we talk about every week could get traction in their local markets if they had a DJ like us playing their music. And all it takes is for it to get on the radio and get popular, and then it gets popular somewhere else, and then it grows and expands. And I know there are other parts of the world that probably listen into our podcast that have radio systems like that still, and if you do, cherish it and enjoy it and understand that it's not that way here in the U.S. and probably other countries as well. But I wish it was. But congratulations to Alice Cooper. I know that was a little bit off topic, but I love...
Another guy who will one day deserve a huge concert in his honor when he decides to pack it in.
For sure. He's another one that's influenced so many over the years. For sure. He definitely deserves some sort of big send-off. Hopefully many years in the future. Like you said, you just saw him.
He sounded great.
Not slowing down anytime soon, and that's great for all of us that are fans of Alice Cooper. But that's our news headlines. Check out our website, nerdcastempire.com. We'll be back with you again tomorrow night, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. I don't yet know what we're going to be talking about tomorrow night, but we'll find something to talk about, and we'll come with those news headlines tomorrow at 7 o'clock. And don't know about Friday yet, TBD, but we'll definitely be back 1 week from tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time next Sunday for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. It'll be the music of June the 20th when we get to next week. Looking forward to that. So join us again next Sunday night. And, of course, you can catch our VODs on YouTube. You can catch our VODs for like a month on Twitch, so join us there. We'll get the podcast version uploaded at some point But again, you don't get the audio clips with the podcast version, so really you want to catch us on Twitch or on YouTube. And subscribe while you're there. Follow us. Our following is continuing to grow, slowly but surely, but we'd really appreciate you to support us, and that doesn't cost you a dime, but we really do appreciate it. But that's going to get us to the new music for this week, which means it's time for me to copy this playlist and get ready to talk about it. Of course, each and every week, Mike will go through and he will pull the new music releases for a given date. That given date this week, if I can spell the word playlist, is on June the 13th. And then basically we'll go through and he will take a song off of each of those new releases and he will put it on this YouTube playlist, which I am sharing in the chat as we speak. If you're watching the YouTube VOD, you'll see a little card pop up at the top of the screen. You can click on that and you can go over and you can find your own music. And this was another pretty solid week of music, so definitely encourage you to do that. And then, of course, we each picked 2 new bands or new albums off of this playlist to spotlight on the podcast. And again, we don't have the music clips on the podcast version. Best place to hear the music clips is live with us because sometimes YouTube or Twitch will eat some of the tracks. So definitely encourage you to join us live on Sunday nights at 7 o'clock. That is the sure way to get to hear it. And before we get to our picks, there were a couple of big releases / re-releases this week. I know one off the top of my head before I even throw it over is one we've actually talked about on this podcast, Metallica's Load Super Edition that's out there. Obviously, it's great. If you've never listened to Load, you should immediately buy it right now.
Yeah, definitely a great album. I mean, maybe the purist wouldn't agree, but as far as Metallica being a hard rock band, Load and Reload are great albums.
For sure.
I don't know if it necessarily needed a remaster or anything. I thought the original sounded pretty good to begin with, but you can buy it in numerous formats. The one I bought was a 3-disc set, which is kind of wild because it does include an album full of basically like the demos that they were working on for the album. And it kind of just takes me back to the old days where a buddy of mine who was a huge Metallica fan would just scour the earth for these like rare tracks of theirs, and now here we are in 2025 and it's just like, hey, take this with the bonus CD, it's got all this on there, no vocals, whatever, and it's crazy. Kind of on that same vein with Metallica, I also ordered the CD collection. It's a 2 CD set from the Sonic Temple sets.
Oh, nice.
Actually, it's a 4 CD set, technically, from both nights. But kind of cool they do that. Every live show, you can basically order the CDs from it, and they send you kind of the soundboard quality live performance. So that's kind of another cool thing from Metallica.
Yeah, that's really awesome. It would be kind of cool if, and maybe it is, I don't know, but if you bought like the VIP passes for Sonic Temple, if they would just like throw that in as part of.
I'm not sure.
That seems like something that'd be really easy to do.
Yeah.
And, now maybe Metallica wouldn't want them to do that. I don't know, but still really cool for sure. Definitely worth checking out. But another band that is still around and still making pretty decent music. I know Buck Cherry has a new release.
Yeah, their new album Roar Like Thunder came out on the 13th, and they still sound like Buck Cherry. There's really nothing else you can say about it. It's just kind of simple hard rock, but it sounds good. The lead vocalist still sounds the same. It's a good time.
For those of us who got into the band relatively early, once they kind of made it big, it almost feels like a time machine when you click on that video and it starts up. You just feel like you're right back into the late 90s, early 2000s all over again. It's like you said, they're not reinventing the wheel by any stretch, but is it good? Yeah, it's good, solid, hard rock, and I love that they're still out there doing that.
Yeah, and I mean, I enjoyed both their first 2 albums, the self-titled and 2001's Time Bomb. Those were really good. I kind of fell off them. I'm guessing a lot of people did, but, saw them live once around that time, and they were really good then, and, they are what they are.
Yeah, it's good to see them still out there making new music, and if you're a fan of theirs, you probably already have it ordered since it's been a couple weeks, but definitely worth checking out. Anything else I didn't think of before we jump to?
I think there was some sort of compilation from Queens of the Stone Age.
Oh,
I didn't catch much of that, but that was certainly noteworthy because it's a band people have heard of. Let's see, what else was there that jumped out besides just generally good stuff? Let's see. That might have been about it, actually.
Yeah, it was an interesting week. Frontiers decided they were going to drop all their albums this week, which was I don't know why they do that, but they did that. We'll have one of those as we talk about the new releases. I always try to limit, at least when I pick them, to just one. But overall, I thought it was a really solid week.
Yeah.
Not maybe the amount of solid things, but the solid things that were there were really good. So definitely check out the playlist, but it's time to get to the picks that we have. Mike, you will kick us off. As always, what do you have for your first pick this week?
Yeah, so for pick number 1, we are going to Spain. We're looking at the second full-length album from a heavy metal/speed metal band. They are Savaged, and the album is Rising.
This was one of those weeks where I had marked both of the ones you chose for re-listen because I was really impressed with both bands on the songs on the playlist. I think these guys are really good.
Yeah, I was certainly impressed as well. This is the follow-up to their debut Night Stealer from 2024. So they're turning out the music. They formed in 2021. They consist of Christian Blade on bass and drums. Alex Harris also on bass, according to Metal Archives. They have 2 bassists, apparently. Jamie Killhead on guitars and vocals, and Joan Grimalt on guitars. When the playlist track Queen of My Salvation started playing, immediately that guitar tone caught my ear. I'm like, okay, this has a definite like throwback 80s metal feel, and something with that sound is always going to be good to me. When you check out the album, the first track, an intro called Ascension, hits you with that same kind of vibe. If you're into traditional metal, I don't think you can hear that. And it's a short song, but I don't think you can hear that and not then want to listen to the whole album. Like, it gives you that taste of like, okay, if this holds true and we move into the other songs, this is going to be killer, and it kind of is. The vocalist, Jamie Killhead, has a perfect voice for this retro metal sound that they've created. I was reading some reviews, one from Metal Addicts from Poleto, whatever his name is. He points out that these guys pretty much use every old school heavy metal cliche, but the energy they bring and the heart and soul that kind of you feel is behind it makes all those cliches really awesome. And I think that's a great way to put it. There's only 9 tracks, and that includes a 42-second intro that I mentioned, and it spans a whopping 36 minutes, so it's quick to get through, and you're going to enjoy every moment of it. Standout tracks, though, on the album include Fire It Up, Queen of My Salvation, The Long Walk, Across the Burning Fields, Rising, and the track that I picked to listen to, the song Stars Are Falling.
Check these guys out. It is Savage with their new release, Rising. This is the 7th track off of this album, Stars Are Falling. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, I love, obviously the chorus was great, but like the guitar part afterward.
Yeah, I really wanted to pick up the guitar harmonies they were using there. I thought that was really cool and gives you a good taste of kind of the sound these guys are bringing. Yeah, just a really cool album.
Yeah, like I said, the track on the playlist was really fun. Looking forward to getting a chance to experience the whole thing, but really good stuff. From these guys out of Spain. Savage, the first pick for Mike with Rising. Definitely check that out. As always, you have 2 picks. What do you have for pick number 2?
Yeah, so for pick number 2, we are heading to Sweden, a fairly common locale. This one was kind of interesting because of their tags on Bandcamp. They have pop and pop rock. I was like, oh, interesting. They're definitely what they consider themselves to be a pop metal band. I feel kind of like a mix of AOR and like symphonic metal, but it's really cool stuff. It's their 3rd album. They are Flight of Icarus, and that album is called Terra Nova.
Yeah, I think there is like a pop rock AOR element to these guys for sure, but it was also a really good listen.
So from their website, their old website, mind you. There was like a new one that promotes the new album, and then an old one that kind of talks about the prior one that has a lot of the links on it. They list their band members as Elizabeth Rosehog on lead vocals and Oscar Franzen on guitars, bass, keys, and backing vocals. They do also mention below some additional musicians, Eric Soderman on additional guitars and Robert Isoyarvi on drums. They do mention, too, that all the songs are written by Franzen and Elizabeth Sarnefelt Rosehog, so they're kind of the duo behind the whole thing. But, whatever it takes, it definitely sounds great. On that old website, they described themselves prior to the release of their previous album using this explanation, which I think they're bold words, but I think they hold true. It says, imagine powerful pop songs in the vein of Roxette with a tasteful touch of Heart and Starship, all embedded in a massive fusion of orchestral metal reminiscent of Nightwish and Within Temptation. I mean, again, you're name dropping some heavy acts, and I think it's not inaccurate. I think that is kind of what they're going for and what they achieve. We talk about a lot of AOR bands on the podcast, but not that many that have a female vocalist. So I think this was kind of a cool change of pace. It's not totally on the other side where it's all symphonic metal. Like, it's still very much pop mindseted AOR with some orchestration in it. You can definitely you can hear the bigness, but you can definitely feel the pop sensibility. So I think it's definitely a cool balance between the two, and I think because of that, I enjoyed every track. Standout tracks on it include Terra Nova, To the Sun, and Back Again, Through Space and Time, Deus Nangilima, and the track that I picked to listen to, the song God Bless.
Check these guys out. This is Flight of Icarus with their new release, Terra Nova. This is track number 7 on this release, God Bless. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. Yeah, it's when you hear a band that lists just a wide range of influences, like, you wonder what's that band going to sound like when you go from Roxette to Nightwish. Like, that's a pretty wide spectrum, but I get kind of what they were thinking with that. Obviously, Roxette, one of my all-time favorite bands of the 80s and 90s.
Yeah.
Female fronted, which is obviously got to be some influence, I would think, in their band. But I also hear the more metal sensibilities, of some of the metal bands you mentioned that kind of ties that all in. So totally get it. They've got a great sound, and again, just they're really, really good.
Yeah, I think it's really just par for the course of Sweden and even Gothenburg in general, where no matter how heavy they are, there's always kind of a pop sensibility and mindset. You see that as far on the heavy end as even some of like the melodic death bands from that area that still have this notion to create songs that are catchy, and these guys definitely nail that.
Yeah, I really, really like what I hear from these guys. Really great release. Check out Flight of Icarus, their new release, out on June the 13th. As always, I have 2 picks as well, and we are going to stay right here in the country of Sweden. We're going to move over to Stockholm for this band, and these guys have been around for a while. This is Insania, or Insania, I'm not sure how it's pronounced, with The Great Apocalypse. These guys have been at it for a long time. They originally formed in 1992. This is their 6th full-length album. The current lineup features Mikko Korsbach on drums, Eric Arco on bass, Nicholas Dahlin on guitar, and Ola Hallen on vocals and guitar. Angry Metal Guy had a really good review of this album, and I'll steal some of what they had to say, because they mentioned that Insania used to get called a Stradivarius tribute band. And obviously Stradivarius is amazing, so, no shame there. But as they note about this particular album, it feels like this is kind of the album, at least, and I haven't heard their previous stuff, so I can't really back this up, where they have kind of separated themselves into something that is really their own. I think they've found kind of their sound. They obviously still pay tribute to their roots, but it is definitely a change. This is exactly from the Angry Metal Guy release. Says, even in vocal phrasing, Ola frequently dodges the expected ABAB symmetry in favor of a through composed or extended line approaches. I wouldn't say that Insania has morphed into prog. There are definitely some prog elements to this album, but their choices are far too deliberate to be accidental, placing them a lot closer to Angra, Star One, Almanac, or Symphony X than Stradivarius, and it is a welcome evolution. There's definitely more of a prog focus here, and I think it's great. And like he said, I feel like it is not very formulaic. I feel like the songs have a lot more variety in the music, and I think it has led them to this release maybe being their best of the 6. Even all these years later, they're still kind of finding new levels. And if you're a fan of power metal, and we all are, this is definitely one you need to pick up. Standout tracks include Indestructible, The Trinity, Revolution, and the song I have for the podcast, No One's Hero. So let's check these guys out. This is Insania with their new album, The Great Apocalypse. This is the 3rd track off of this album, No One's Hero. Let's listen to a little bit of that now.
Simple down.
Yeah, by the way, the vocals are really outstanding in this release and definitely take this over the top. But again, I think they have done a great job on this album to really find something that they can call their own. And really this, as long as they've been around, this could be some of their best stuff, and I'm excited to go back and listen to some of their old stuff now. But Mike, your thoughts on these guys?
Yeah, it sounds great, and I totally agree with the reviewer as far as, like, vocally that does feel like Timo Kotopalto from Stradivarius, but musically, like, through that chorus, it felt like Angra, and then coming at the end of the chorus, it felt like Symphony X. It was just, you could definitely hear those notes in there, but yeah, it sounded great.
Yeah, really, really good release from those guys. I really enjoyed that album. Definitely worth checking out. And again, you'll note some of the prog elements as you go through it. I think there's definitely that influence as well, but definitely worth checking out Insania and their new release. As always, I have 2 albums on my list as well, and we're going to head to one that and we'll talk about how Mike and I both almost kind of missed these guys. But thankfully, we kind of doubled back around to them, and it was definitely worth it. This is a London-based classic rock band. This is Star Circus, and the album is From the Wreckage. These guys were formed in 2019. This is their 2nd full-length album. I just want to kind of get it out of the top. Mike and I have talked about on this podcast extensively that when we're looking for this playlist and we're looking at this music, when you have bands that are creating music videos, that's impressive to us because that is a level of effort that can take a band above and beyond. The music video, the song that was on this playlist, which I believe was One Hit Wonder, was a little weird at the beginning. I'm just going to say it, like, no offense, hopefully to the band. They don't take any offense. There was definitely an artistic choice there, and it was almost to where I know Mike flat out said, like, nearly didn't get by that. I kind of was in the same boat. Luckily, I was kind of half paying attention through the open. I just knew Mike had marked it as one to listen to. And I'm glad that, we both did, because this is a really good classic rock release. This is their, as I mentioned, their second album, coming back from Separate Sides, which was their debut. It's primarily a two-person act with Dave Winkler and Sophie Aurelia Young kind of leading the way. From what a lot of the reviews said, this is kind of harder than their first release, and I think we're going to hear that in the audio clip, because we're going to play another guitar solo, which is definitely good. A-list influences on their Bandcamp is Queen, Thin Lizzy, Cheap Trick, and Def Leppard, among others. Just a great classic rock sound, and to me, it's classic rock with a metal twist. There's definitely more metal than some of those bands that I just mentioned. But it is great that there are bands that are still going for this sound in 2025. But again, the guitar parts are definitely a little bit harder. They did credit some other people involved in the production of this. William Robertson produced it. They had guest appearances from Tom Draper of Carcass and Spirit Adrift, and Richie Mohicano from Doberman. Aurelia Young actually did the artwork for the album as well, which is really cool. So always great to see artwork and also get the credits for the artwork. But it's got great harmonies. It's got great guitars, really powerful guitars. I think it's a really good listen. Standout tracks include The Wreckage, Turn the Tide, Two Odds Make an Even, and the song we're going to listen to on the podcast is Chained to You. So check these guys out now. This is Star Circus with their second release. The release is from The Wreckage. This is the second song off of this album. We're going to catch a little bit of guitar solo first and then come back around to the chorus at the end. This is Chained to You. Let's listen to a little bit of that now. We'll dump that out there just because, again, I wanted to include that guitar solo. Again, I think it's classic and even sometimes a little bit of kind of a southern rock vibe to it a little bit, but it's got the metal guitars. It's the harmonies are great. Overall, really good album, a really great classic rock album. Again, the video was a little strange, but we got through it, and thankful that I did, because this is a good album from Star Circus. Mike, your thoughts?
Yeah, and the crazy thing is there's really nothing wrong with the video itself.
It's just weird.
It was just watching the beginning of it, my first thought was, oh, this is going to be one of those bands that calls their sound like post something or avant-garde
yes.
or indie or one of those tags where I'm like, oh, I may not like this. And their sound was anything but that. Their sound was actually just really good hard rock. In that clip you played, there were times where it felt like this was like a classic rock band from the 70s into kind of like a pop metal band from the 80s, kind of mixing back and forth. I thought they might even break into like the Freebird solo there at the end. I wasn't sure what was happening, but no, they have a great sound, and I feel bad now that I kind of prejudged them based on the beginning of that video, but no, they're great.
Yeah, like I said, it happens, and I never fault anybody for having their artistic thoughts into a video. And again, happy that they're making
videos.
More videos. Absolutely, everybody should make videos if you can afford to do so. So, and again, that's cheaper now than ever before as well. But really good album, definitely worth checking out if you're a fan of kind of modern classic metal. I think you'll really dig this. But that's the new music for this week. It's time to get into the vault, where Mike and I will give you a couple of classic albums you can check out. Mike is going through his vault. We've turned the corner. We are headed for home. We are up to the letter R this week, and a lot of good choices, I'm sure, for the letter R. But what did you end up going with?
Yeah, R was definitely a bit richer than some of the other letters leading up to it. In prior vault trips, I first went with the band Rough Silk, I think, in my first trip around the alphabet, which is a great album, Mephisto. Then I think the second time around when I was doing the glam bands, I went with Rough Cut. If I can find that list again. Letter R. Yep, their self-titled 1985 album. So this time around in my vault, I am going with the 7th and currently final album from a California-based rock band. This was a follow-up to their 1999 self-titled album. The band is Ratt, and the album is 2010's Infestation.
Yeah, I mean, Ratt would have obviously been an obvious choice on the previous two times, but they would actually fit both categories. But kind of nice that you saved them here. And yeah, this was the end, as it turns out, but still really good stuff from the band, even right till the very end.
Yeah, the end for now. You never know.
You never know.
Crazier things have happened. What I like about this album and what's interesting about it is this was 2010. This is 11 years after their prior album, the self-titled 1999 Ratt album. That was the first album that I bought kind of as a fan that it was new when I bought it. Like, you know, I got into a lot of these bands in the mid to late 90s, so long after they were popular. So I'd picked up the 1999 Ratt album, and
that album's so good.
It was a good album, but it didn't feel like a Ratt album.
Yeah.
Like you stack it up to their 80s albums, up to like 1990s Detonator, and it didn't feel the same. According to Wikipedia, the 1999 album shifted to a more blues-influenced hard rock sound, which I can't really argue with. It is definitely not a pop metal, you know, glam sleaze rock that they kind of made famous back in the 80s. And I get it. I mean, that was their first new material since 1990. You know, it was 9 years later. Robin Crosby was gone. A few years later, he'd pass away, sadly. Juan Cruiser wasn't in the band, who had done a lot of the writing, or a healthy amount of the writing. And it was 1999. You weren't going to write another Dancing Undercover. Like, that wasn't going to resonate with anybody. So that album's good, but it just felt kind of downtrodden compared to their earlier work. Songs like Over the Edge, Live for Today, We Don't Belong, Tug of War, It Ain't Easy. Like, it sounded good, but it kind of felt like depressed Ratt, which is probably the kind of music that worked in the 1990s, even up to the late 90s.
Yeah.
So fast forward to 2010, and at this point, I think the stigma of being an 80s metal band had mostly gone away. I think people were starting to embrace that sound. You started seeing more festivals pop up, celebrating kind of that good time rock that existed in the 80s and early 90s. And we have Ratt coming back with a new album. You know, at that point, they still had Stephen Pearcy, Warren DeMartini, and Bobby Blotzer in the band, so you at least had kind of that main core. This is a fun album. It's, you know, Stephen Pearcy sounds good. It's basic, fun Hollywood Strip rock or Sunset Strip rock. As a result, to me, it's ultimately a more enjoyable listen than the album from '99. Sadly, the band as a whole isn't a thing anymore, which I mentioned. Cruiser did tour last year as the other voice of Ratt. Stephen Pearcy and Warren DeMartini, though, have been touring together and still are, but not under the Ratt name. I guess they had some legal issues around it, and now they're kind of at this point where, despite winning the lawsuit with it, Pearcy basically said he'd only use the name if it was a tour featuring the classic full lineup, not just random pieces. And he said he even, I guess a few years back, before there was a rift between them, he and Juan Cruiser did tour together under the Ratt name, and he said he kind of regrets that now. You know, and a few years ago, he even mentioned he would like to do one more Ratt album with the full band together. He said if so, it would be just a business thing, kind of alluding to the possibility that maybe he doesn't get along with all of them very well. But to see him and Warren DeMartini touring together is really cool, because DeMartini is an amazing guitarist. Yeah, I remember listening to this album during the really long drive to and from Vegas back in 2011. I don't know how I survived that, but
this album should get some credit for that.
yeah, I mean, great music. Standout tracks on the album include Eat Me Up Alive, Best of Me, A Little Too Much, Last Call, Lost Weekend, Take Me Home, Don't Let Go. You know, give it a listen. It feels like the album that should have happened in like 1992, but never did.
I think if you look at the Wikipedia page, the thing that stands out to me about this album is that it did well. Like it peaked at number 4 on the U.S. top hard rock albums chart on Billboard, number 8 on the Tastemaker albums chart, number 7 on the top rock albums chart. Did well abroad. It charted in France, it charted in Finland, charted in Japan on number 22 on the Oricon chart. It charted in the UK as well, top 40 there. So it's a little strange that the album seems to have been, to some level, commercially successful.
Yeah.
And yet there wasn't another follow-up afterward. That, clearly, whether it was already at a point where they just all couldn't coexist and this was just kind of the end, or they just, for whatever reason, just didn't come out with something else. But, like, if I released an album and it charted in the top 10 on 3 of the big Billboard charts and number 30 on Billboard 200, which, of course, is all music,
Yeah.
I might have thought about trying to make another album. Like, hey, let's strike while the iron's hot.
Yeah, and I kind of feel like Best of Me kind of had some traction either like on YouTube, or I feel like that video was somewhat successful. But yeah, I think it goes to show you, and especially once the grunge and post-grunge eras kind of went their way, I think when these bands, if they write good music, even if it feels like something they did in 1988, if it's good music, people will listen to it, people will buy it, and this album was, if this is the last album, it's kind of a great kind of final piece.
I'm sure it did well on YouTube because you just mentioned it, but I have to mention also in the Wikipedia notes that the video for Best of Me was premiered on March 22nd, 2010 on AOL.
Wow.
So, yeah.
Wow.
That doesn't feel like it was that far long ago, but that sentence made me feel so much older when I read that. It was also
What
released.
does that even mean? Like, how does something debut on AOL? I was alive during this whole period and an adult, but I still don't really understand that phrase.
Yeah, it might be worth some investigating.
Was it popping up on my AOL Messenger? Like, I don't remember that.
But it also appeared on Metal Mania on VH1 Classic.
I'd have to go to like AOL keyword rat and find it. Is that how that worked?
It's a good question.
Did Prodigy not carry it? Or
certainly Prodigy was gone by 2010,
yeah,
right?
Sure.
Yeah. So now I feel really old.
Let me ask Jeeves real quick and see if he knows what happened to it.
All this old talk and it just So, but yeah, it is a good album, and it is. I would love to see there be more Ratt, but I also totally respect kind of the feelings about maybe not touring under that name. We kind of talked about that earlier with Black Sabbath and everything. So respect that, but if they make another album, I'd totally be down for it. But in the meantime, listen to Infestation, the 2010 release from Ratt, Mike's pick for the Vault this week. I, of course, am going through all of the Frontiers acts, 2 weeks on each letter. Last week I picked Hardline. This week I have been handed a band that I'd never heard of, but it turns out I'm glad that I did get a chance to check this album out. This is the self-titled release, the first album from the band Hurtsmile. It is Hurtsmile. There's odds are you've maybe never heard of this band either, and by you I mean the listener, but you should probably check it out. This is a band formed in 2007 by Extreme frontman Gary Cherone with his brother Mark and Joe Pescia. After Extreme released Savages of Rock in 2009, Nuno Bettencourt went on tour with Rihanna, which put Extreme on hiatus. So Gary Cherone got together with his brother and basically went back to the Hurtsmile project. This album was recorded in January 2011 and released January 2011 in Europe and then February 2011 in the U.S. Other members of the band, Mark Cherone also plays in a band called, they played together in a band called Slip Kid. The Who tribute band. The band features Joe Pesci, who plays with Tantric. Funny that they're coming up again. And the bassist for Bettencourt's Drama Gods and drummer Dana Spellman, who was a student of Extreme former drummer Mike Mangini. So there are certainly some ties in there, which makes sense. I'll be honest, like, I don't know what they were exactly going for here. Like, the lyrics, the songs, I don't know if they're the best written songs. They certainly don't necessarily hold up to the Extreme hits, but it sounds great. Like, I'm convinced you could probably just have Gary Cherone sing any album of that era, and it's going to sound amazing. I don't know if I'd ever go back and listen to it again. Like, I think I'll just stick to my Extreme collection. But again, it sounds awesome. The harmonies are great, as you would anticipate. The guitar parts are great. It's just, like I said, maybe not the best written album. They did release one more album, Retro Grenade, in 2014, but that's the last from them. Extreme, of course, kind of got back together after that, and are touring and have been touring, and you should go see them if you haven't. We saw them last year, and it was amazing. Definitely would go see them again. I think
Living Color.
And Living Color for sure. But yeah, that is Hurtsmile. Standout tracks include Just War Theory, Stillborn, Set Me Free, and Jesus Would You Meet Me. Yeah, interesting stuff. But I came away, and I know this is a repeat for maybe our diehard listeners, but the one takeaway I had from seeing Extreme live is I did not realize how good of a frontman Gary Cherone was. I was totally, and Nuno Betancourt's amazing also, because they're kind of co-front men. But Gary Cherone absolutely blew me away. The dude has more energy than anybody I think I've ever seen at any age, let alone at his age.
I felt old watching him, and he's probably 20 years older than me.
Probably. But he's so good. And like I said, if you haven't seen Extreme, you must go see them before they stop touring. I want to go see them again. But Gary Cherone, maybe one of the most underrated frontmen of our generation, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a star. He and Nuno both. And I mean, Van Halen wasn't wrong in bringing him in. Even though that album tanked and it's kind of looked at as a failure, he's a great frontman. There's no reason to not bring him in to sing for you.
Yeah, for sure. So
I just wonder, as far as Nuno Betancourt goes, has he made more money outside of Extreme than in Extreme?
There can't be any way that that's not true.
I mean, the dude has appeared, obviously, with Rihanna. He has appeared and worked with Janet Jackson. Let's see, Robert Palmer, Tony Braxton. He made an appearance on a Jam Project album. That's kind of wild. Joe Jonas, Nickelback,
legend.
Yeah,
No question, he's made more money outside of.
I would imagine
Extreme
so.
By probably a factor.
The dude's incredible.
He is, for sure. Everybody should want to be working with him because he's incredible. But yeah, check out Hurtsmile if you want. I think honestly, probably just stick to the Extreme stuff, and that would be okay. But the randomizer decides, and when we go there, and I'm glad it did. It was
Flaming Arrow.
let the flaming arrow decide. And in this case, that's what we got. So we'll move on to letter I next week with the music from Frontiers, and we'll see what I can find for the letter I. But that'll be coming up next week. But it is time to get to the Power Trio. It is our hard rock hat trick we talk about every week, and I promised last week that we would do an America-themed one this week, and it is so wide open. We're talking 3 songs with some tie to America, and it could be, you could pick something by the band Kansas, you could pick a song that's about an American city or America itself, a song that just has America as a theme. There's just so many directions you can go, so I thought we would really get a good selection. Nothing from Chris tonight. Did we get anything from Shane?
We did not. I was texting him earlier, and then he kind of went silent after I threw the question out there. I don't know if it was too wordy and it blew his mind. I don't know, but we did not get any responses from him.
That's all right. Well, it is also a holiday weekend as well.
Yeah.
So, but what do you have for us? And I'm sure you have honorable mentions as well.
I did throw in one honorable mention. My top 3, though. First off, I went with the Geographic Location Band. Get that out of the way. I went with the band Boston and the song Don't Look Back.
Okay.
From their 1978 album of the same name. It's just an awesome song, very inspirational, motivational, and ties into America for that reason too on the 4th of July weekend. You're just like, hey, we're getting there. They used the song in the first season of Cobra Kai also, which when I watched it reminded me how great the song was. So there is that. Pick number 2, I went with the band Iced Earth and their song Declaration Day from their 2004 album The Glorious Burden.
There you go.
Not surprising from someone like John Schaefer. He wrote an album about various moments in history, a lot of which involving kind of American history, and this is a song about the Declaration of Independence. So,
why not?
Can't get much more America than that.
No, really, you can't.
And pick number 3, I'm going with Megadeth and their song Washington is Next from the 2007 album United Abominations. Megadeth are kind of the champion when writing songs about New World Orders and societal collapses, and this song kind of hits all of that, and it's just an awesome song.
It is. I can't argue with that. That's a great song. yeah, it's really good stuff.
For my honorable mention, I went with Testament and their song "The Evil Has Landed" from 2008's "The Formation of Damnation." This album came out in 2008. I guess it was supposed to come out in 2004, but it got delayed due to some touring. But "The Evil Has Landed" is actually a song about the 9/11 terror attacks and kind of a tribute to the victims. So, songs that make you think of America don't necessarily have to be for a good reason.
Sure. I guess it would have been a little more timely in 2004, just 3 years after.
Yeah, you think like by 2008, it's like, why are we talking about this now? But since it was supposed to come out in 2004, I feel like that makes a little more sense.
Yeah, I think that's fair. But all great choices for sure. I went with the obvious one, and then I went with one way off the board, and then I went with one that I think is just about the perfect pick because of it kind of fits twice in this category. You got a couple like that as well. I picked Los Angeles is Burning by Bad Religion because it's probably my favorite song of theirs.
Yeah.
Obviously, Los Angeles was actually burning.
Prophetic in many ways.
Yeah. But yeah, to me, it's everything that I enjoy about Bad Religion. It gets right to the point. It's short. It's catchy. It rocks.
I don't know if a band has used oohs and ahs better than Bad Religion.
I think that's fair to say. not in many, many years. Like that, they brought that back from like the 60s, I think.
Yeah, it's kudos.
I'm off the board for my second pick. I am picking the song "America" by Neil Diamond. They're coming to America.
That's a great song.
It was just one, and the boats and on the plane. Because now I hear that song, and who do I think of? Will Ferrell singing Neil Diamond.
Yeah,
talking about the burned out Shoney's where he was going to meet Bigfoot, but it's him doing that song and doing a very inappropriate version of it because he forgets the words or he gets racist or something or something. But yeah, it's a classic to me. It is kind of that hopeful spirit, and Neil Diamond, I know it's probably a controversial thing. The dude's good. Like, Sweet Caroline gets way too much run. He has other stuff that's actually...
I Am.
Yeah, I Am. That's a great song. Yeah, so throw that in there. And finally, again, just because I feel like it kind of ties in perfectly, it's the band Chicago, which fits the American theme. And, of course, it is the song Saturday in the Park. I mean, the lyrics literally say, Saturday in the Park, I think it was the 4th of July. And indeed it was. 4th of July in 1970 was when that song was written. The story's on their Wikipedia page if you want to check it out.
Wild.
Which I tried to open, but it was written as Robert Lamb was walking through the park in New York City on July 4th, 1970, and he said he came back and said that he saw steel drum players, singers, dancers, and jugglers. I said, man, it's time to put music to this. And, that is basically the theme of Saturday in the Park, of him just walking through the park and seeing all this craziness going on. And again, it being the 4th of July. So just kind of tied both, obviously Chicago qualifies, but also a song that is literally about the 4th of July. 55 years ago, which is frightening to me that it's been that long. But
I thought of one more with a city name, probably the best song that's just a city name. Weird Al, Albuquerque.
Yeah, that would have really been a good choice. Songs by the band America would have also been good choices. A Horse with No Name is a classic one from them. There's just, again, this is another one of those categories that we'll certainly revisit because there are so many songs you can choose. And since we only had you and I, we have so many more of them that were left unpicked. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, let us know. Join the Discord, which I did not post the link to, and I will do before I sign off. Join the Discord. You can let us know what your 3 America songs are on this 4th of July weekend. Let us know what you would pick. And again, it's a very broad definition, so feel free to expand your horizons and come up with some interesting choices for your 3 America songs. But that is just about going to wrap things up for this edition of the Hard Rock Empire. We thank you so much for joining us on this holiday weekend. We'll be back again tomorrow, another episode of the Nerdcast News Report, 7 o'clock Eastern Time. Again, don't know what we're talking about. We'll talk about something. We might talk a little bit about the summer anime season, which is coming up and getting started. So a lot of big shows coming up this summer. Talk about that tomorrow night. And, of course, we'll be back with you again 1 week from tonight, 7 o'clock Eastern Time, for another episode of the Hard Rock Empire. We're talking the music of June the 20th next week, so make sure you join us for that. Big thanks to Stove Leg Media for their continued support of our podcast. Big thanks to Mike for all the work he does on this, and a big thanks to you for listening whenever and wherever you listen to us. We will see you again tomorrow night for another episode of the Nerdcast News Report. Until then, have a great holiday weekend, what's left of it, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow night. And until then, don't forget to join the Empire, the Nerdcast Empire.